Welcome to today's semi-annual performance reporting webinar on calculating your FTEs. If that's a foreign term, don't worry, we'll get into it. I want to start by thanking Anna and all of TA2TA and the NCJ-FCJ for graciously hosting our webinar today. And thank you also to our interpreters and captioners who are helping us reach you all effectively. I keep wanting to say good afternoon, but I know for some folks it might be the morning. So good afternoon and good morning. Thank you all for being here. So my name is Devin Grayson Wallace, and I am here with my colleague, Casey Wynn. We are both members of the VAWA Measuring Effectiveness Initiative, aka VAWA MEI. We are a team that has a technical assistance grant through VAWA to help you all learn about and complete your OVW performance reports. We're ourselves a grantee. We have a cooperative agreement with OVW, so we are distinct from the feds. We are not part of the federal government at all. We see our role as here to help and support you all with your performance reporting. The other half of our mission is to support OVW in reporting on the effectiveness of what was done with VAWA funding. One thing I want to note is that if you ever hear someone at OVW or someone at a different TA provider tell you, oh, call Muskie, they can help you or they'll know how to answer your question. That's us. We used to previously be located within the Muskie School of Public Service or something like that. Thank you, Casey. The Muskie School within the University of Southern Maine. And we are no longer housed under that particular little subset within the University of Southern, but we are still at the University of Southern Maine under the Catherine Cutler Institute. So anyway, just to say, we are Muskie. If anyone ever sends you there, that's Casey and I and our whole team at the VAWA MEI. And Andrew just very helpfully put the link to our website into the chat. I know Anna said this, but in case anyone is joining a little bit late and missed it, if you have any questions at any time, please put them into the question and answer pod, and we will all be keeping a close eye on that. Casey and our other colleague, Andrew, who is helping us today. We like to try to reserve the chat for warm chatter, as many folks have been already doing, and also for anyone needing tech assistance. So please reach out to Anna if you are having any difficulties with any technical aspect of today's presentation. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Casey. So today's plan. As I said, this webinar is dedicated to learning how to calculate your FTEs or full-time equivalents. That is the data that is reported in the staff information section of your semi-annual performance reports. That being said, this whole webinar and the information that we are going to go over is tailored for discretionary grantees. So if you are a STOP or SASP administrator or a STOP or SASP subgrantee, the numbers that we're talking about and examples that we're going to go over don't actually apply to your reporting because we did design this for discretionary grantees and the two sets of programs are on different timelines. So hopefully you all know who you are, but just in case anyone is here with a different type of grant, wanted to put that public service announcement out there. The other thing I will say right off the bat is that nothing that we're going to go over is new information. This webinar is serving as a refresher and nothing has changed about how you will be reporting your FTEs in the staff section of your semi-annual performance reports. So if anyone here was just, looking to see if changes were made or you're feeling tight for time, you can go to our website and there is a previously recorded version of this exact presentation. It's all the same content that we're going to go over today, so feel free to view that at any time, including now. If you need to duck out, we totally understand and we will not take it personally. And Andrew just dropped that link into the chat as well. And the last logistical thing I will note is that the slides for today's webinar are also already available at that link. So if you would like to download those to read along with us, please look at the chat and see the most recent message from Andrew. Okay, what we are going to go over today in order to learn how to calculate your FTEs are some practice FTE calculations, a tool on our website called the FTE calculator that will actually walk you through how to do every staff calculation needed and give you the FTE numbers that you will report, and review other available resources and where to ask for help. Now, for some very general introduction to what FTEs are. The first principle when it comes to reporting your staff FTEs in the staff section is to only report staff time that is supported directly with the OVW grant you are filling out your performance report for this current reporting period. So only FTEs whose salary is provided, whether fully or partially by OVW funds, should be reported in the staff section. Now, this would include contracted work or overtime work. It doesn't matter how much time was paid with grant funds, only that some staff time was paid with this particular grant that you're filling out your performance report for. The second principle to keep in mind is to always report to the second decimal. So FTEs are captured as whole numbers with a 1.00 FTE signifying that one person worked for the entire reporting period and was entirely grant funded with a particular award. They're not a percentage. So you will need to prorate down for anything less than 1.0 FTE. And that's why we have a whole training dedicated to how to do these calculations, because they can be a little bit tricky. So if anyone is working part-time or was hired partway through the reporting period, or if their time is supported from multiple funding sources, in each of those cases, you will need to prorate down. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you, Casey. You read my mind. These are the last two principles to keep in mind when reporting your staff FTEs. The first is to report by activity performed rather than by job title. So just because you might call someone, say, an advocate, if they are also doing training or coordinating the whole program, you're going to want to make sure that you are representing their time across each of the functions that they fulfill for this grant. And part of the reason that is so important is because the staff section really helps paint the picture of what was done under the scope of your grant with this grant money. And we'll have examples that walk you through how to divvy up a person's role between multiple categories. As you will see, there's a little exception rule here, except for a handful of programs where, as you will see, there are not multiple categories. So hopefully, if that's you already recognize that you have a much more simple FTE calculation to perform. But if this raises a question for you, especially if you have one of those grants and what I just said confuse you, feel free to reach out to us anytime. And we're always happy to answer your questions or even walk through your specific FTEs and how to report them. That goes for anyone, not just those programs. If you have any questions following today's webinar, as you're pondering it and you want some one-on-one assistance, feel free to reach out to us and we can set up a phone call or a Zoom or answer your questions via email and walk through whatever FTEs you need to report. In the meantime, if you have a question now, feel free to put it in the Q&A pod. And then finally, we ask you not to use the other category if an existing category is at all applicable. And if you are going to use the other category, please be specific and correlate each entry with an FTE amount if you have multiple FTEs. So by specific, we do not mean like consultant, but what it was that they did, the function of what they did under the grant. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Casey. I am one of Devon's colleagues. I am going to take us through some examples next, starting with this cheat sheet, because why not? This math is not everybody's favorite. And so over the years, we've found that it's helpful to provide a quick cheat sheet that you can screenshot or download later when you download the slides if you decide to. So as Devon mentioned, full-time equivalents or FTEs are always calculated based on the 6-month reporting period. Even if that means your agency did not use grant funds for the whole 6 months, you're always prorating staff FTEs based on the 6-month reporting period so that what you report can be also compared across what other grantees report and how the funds get used. So in a 6-month reporting period, there are 26 weeks. And in general, most grantees tend to lean on having a 40-hour work week. I say in general because there are absolutely agencies that have different full-time work weeks, like 37 and a half hours or 35 hours. If your full-time is not 40 hours, this cheat sheet needs to be edited for you to reflect what full-time is at your agency. And we can absolutely provide that if you ever wanted to reach out to us. You can see here that the math is laid out. So if you even felt so inclined as to recreate this cheat sheet for yourself based on whatever your full-time equivalent is, it's absolutely doable. In a 26-week reporting period, with 40 hours per week that could be worked by someone who's full-time, that would lead you to 1,040 total working hours in the 6-month reporting period. So the rest of this cheat sheet is based on 1,040 possible hours worked for someone who is full-time. That means that 1.00 FTE is the same as saying someone worked full-time 40 hours a week for the entire 6 months. And they were 100% funded by the grant. If any pieces of that sentence are not true, you'll end up prorating. For example, if someone worked 20 hours per week, even though your agency considers 40 hours a week to be full-time, you can see that is the second row here of calculations. 20 hours per week is the same as 520 total hours in the 6-month reporting period, divided by the possible 1,040 hours would get you to 0.5 FTEs. But if you're quick with math, you might have noticed that's the exact same thing as doing 20 hours divided by 40 hours. There are lots of different methods to calculate FTEs, so we're going to go over a few different ones today. Another way you might have broken this out would be that 50% of someone's salary is grant funded and they worked full-time for the whole 6-month reporting period. That would be 0.5 FTEs as well. So there's lots of different ways to read this cheat sheet, and it only has a couple of examples on it, but hopefully it'll help some folks. And if this cheat sheet isn't your cup of tea, we're going to go over some different methods because everyone has a different learning style. And if at the end of this webinar, you still absolutely hate calculating FTEs, please reach out to us for assistance. We're happy to help anybody calculate these. All right, I'm going to walk through a couple of examples, and I'm also going to give you time to process. So in example 1, your university, we're pretending that this is a university grantee, receives an OVW program grant, which pays for a full-time counselor whose salary is 75% funded by the grant. So they are full-time, but they are 75% funded by the grant. Additionally, a second full-time counselor is 15% funded by the grant. So you've got two separate staff for the same staff category of counselor. They're both full-time during the 6-month reporting period, but a percentage of each of their salaries is supported by the grant. So feel free to consider this example. You're welcome to post into the chat if you feel so brave what guess you might give. I see some brave folks. Thank you for your participation. The key to this example is that only a percentage of their salaries are grant funded. So neither of these two staff are represented by one FTE. And because of that, we're going to be prorating for both of them. And a bunch of you are absolutely correct. The answer was A. The correct way to get to this in this example with the information you were given, you could go about it two different ways. 75% of one is 0.75 and 15% of one is 0.15. Added together gets you to 0.9 FTEs. The other way you could think of that would be, what was the other thing I was going to say? Let me back up to see what else we had for information. No, I think that's the way I would do it. That's the way I would recommend thinking about this one. The percentage of salary funded is usually the easiest because it's a percentage of the one FTE. And someone in the chat is reminding me that you could do number of hours worked. You absolutely could. That would create an extra layer of math here that not everyone would be willing to do. But if you were going to, and then you were using the 1,040 hours total, you could take 75% of those hours and 15% of those hours. It might lead you to a slightly different number due to rounding by like a tenth. Devin says that numbers of hours worked is always her preference as well. Everyone has a different preference. The thing I'll note about what I just said is rounding. As Devin mentioned, you always do need to round up to the second decimal place. Because of that, you have a little bit of discretion when things are split unevenly. So what I mean by that is if you have a 1 split in half, and then the way you're breaking it out by staff category might lead you to reporting, or a more common one would be a third. If you have one FTE covering 3 different categories, just because of math, one category might have 0.34 and the other two would have 0.33. And you have the discretion of how you would split those up because rounding happens. So don't fret too much about that. Alrighty, in our second example, I didn't go far enough. There we go. Example 2. Your organization's OEW program grant is used to fund a part-time trainer, and they spend 6 hours per week providing trainings and 4 hours per week completing support staff tasks. So this is someone who is grant funded to work for 10 hours per week. We are going to assume for this example that 40 hours per week is full-time. And I'll also plug that in this example, consider the different job functions. I see some guesses coming in, and that's super cool. I also should note that our examples are not grant specific. So they might include job functions that don't apply to your grant. And that's okay. It's just an example of how to calculate the math. So don't be thrown off by what isn't allowable under your grant just because it's in our example. All right. So example 2, the aim of it was to force you to split up the FTE by job function, even though it was one staff person. So they were being grant funded to do training and support staff activities, which is 2 different categories. And they were part-time, so only working 6 out of 40 possible hours on training and 4 out of 40 possible hours on support staff activities. The easiest way I would tackle this for the purposes of prorating would be to do the 6 divided by 40 hours and the 4 divided by 40 hours, rather than creating a total hours worked, which you still could do. If you did 6 times 26 weeks and then divided that by 1,040 working hours, you would still get to 0.15 FTEs. And same for the 4 hours. If you did 4 hours times 26 weeks divided by the 1,040 possible working hours, you would still get to 0.1 FTEs. And I see someone in the chat's asking for a link to the PowerPoint, and we absolutely have that. Someone will post it in the chat shortly. All right, we have one more example, I think. It might be 2, but I think it's 2. Okay, thanks, Devin. So example 3 is, again, gonna force you to think about prorating, because what would be the fun if we just asked you for a 1, right? Let's pretend your agency is using grant funds for a full-time counseling position, and the counselor was hired partway through the reporting period. So you're thinking about your July to December 2025 report, and this is someone who did not work July or August, but started working in September. That means they worked 4 out of the 6-month reporting period. So I can say it quickly too, but I see some folks are guessing that the quickest way to prorate this might just be by months worked, because we're assuming this person is 100% grant funded and they were full-time. And also, if I'm going too quickly on any of these examples, please feel free to slow me down. I love that some folks are willing to take multiple guesses too. All right. So in this example, we're starting at 1 FTE because the person is full-time and fully funded, but we're prorating based on actual time worked on the grant. So 4 out of 6 months is similar to doing 4 divided by 6, which gives us a rounded 0.67. Because this is someone wearing only one function hat at their agency, you can put the 0.67 into one category. But this is also an example of, if their time was split between other functions, you would be splitting an odd number, 0.67. And so you might have 2 different numbers in 2 different categories based on how they spend their time, and that's okay. And then example 4 is, we're going to do an hourly example. So let's pretend your grant pays a translator for 65 hours of work during the 6-month reporting period. and we're assuming that 40 hours per week is still full-time. So the full-time total hours possible would be 1,040 hours. All right. Nice work, folks. So in this example, we're doing the hourly calculation of 65 hours paid for by the grant out of 1,040 full-time hours in a 6-month reporting period, which gets us to C, 0.06 FTEs. I'm so grateful for everyone who's willing to participate in our examples, and I hope that they were helpful. But I also know that FTEs can be a lot more complicated. So if you have more complicated examples that you want to do offline with us one-on-one, please feel free to reach out. All right. Where am I at with this? I'm on slide 15. Okay, cool. We're doing great. So some common reporting issues. The quickest one is we might sometimes notice really high numbers in a single category because a decimal point gets missed. So if you're intending to report one FTE and you feel so inclined to move quickly, you might find during your final review that you accidentally reported 100 FTEs, which might sound hilarious, but I promise you it happens frequently. So when you do your final review, don't be afraid to peek at your FTE total to see if it makes sense to you still, just in case you missed an actual decimal point. Another thing we might notice, especially within the context of your grant narratives, is if you haven't prorated your staff. So if in your narrative we pick up on the fact that you have someone who is wearing multiple functions and you report in multiple sections of your form, but not multiple staff categories, that might clue us in that there might be a staff person lumped into one category that could have been separated by job function. One recommendation we have for that is to consider the section that you're reporting in, what staff category would likely reflect those activities. So, for example, if your performance report has a training section and you intend to fill it out because you have grant-funded trainings, you're likely going to be reporting on a grant-funded trainer FTE. It's pretty rare that your grant funds will somehow pay for the training without having also somehow supported something about that training. Like, I did not word that very well. Sorry. I'm going to think of it differently. Sorry. Let me say the victim services section. I can say an example for that one a lot easier. So if you're reporting on victim services, you're also going to most likely have some type of staff category reported that reflects direct victim services. My whole point in that was just to say that you'll likely be reporting in categories that sort of match up with the sections of your performance report you intend to report on. Yeah, sorry I fumbled over an example there. The other thing we might notice is in your narrative, if you specify which months of your grant award, which months during the reporting period your grant award was being used, that can help identify when you forgot to report prorated FTEs. So for example, if you're a newer agency or you have a newer grant and grant funds didn't start being drawn down until partway through the 6-month reporting period, you're going to want to prorate your staff FTEs to however many months during the 6-month reporting period you did support staff time. It always helps to add in your narrative which month your grant was starting to be drawn down. So if you just started drawing down grant funds in December of 2025, it doesn't hurt to add that somewhere in your narrative to help give context to the numerical values that you've reported. All right. We have loads of resources to tailor to different learning styles. Our hope is that something we have available or our own one-on-one time can support you with calculating your FTEs with as little stress as possible. If you are curious about poking around on our website, we have an e-learning video that's not a webinar, but it's a more structured video that goes through more examples of how to calculate FTEs and consider reporting your FTEs. We have frequently asked questions on our website, which I can even show you over here. We've got, you can even just search the word FTEs on our website to find a bunch of different resources. As Devin mentioned, this specific webinar is geared toward discretionary grantees, not STOP or SASP formula grantees, because the timeline of those grants are different. But we do have specific formula FTE calculators on our website if you happen to be an agency that also has to report on those. All right, loads of resources is the point. And we have the PowerPoint slides from today, and we will have another training video posted. There are, let me think. Oh, the other thing I would say is if your agency does have something different from 40 hours as full-time, we have an example on our website of how to get to 35 hours per week as full-time. But like I said, I'm happy to support you with recalculating your FTEs if full-time isn't 40 hours at your agency. Okay. The next thing we're hoping to do is to walk you through the FTE calculator. So if you're curious about what the FTE calculator is and it's something you feel like you might be interested in using, I'm going to demo it right now. Feel free to ask questions. And let me think. This is something you can download right from our website as well. All right. When you do download it, it's going to download as an Excel file. You can see this on my screen, right, Devin? Okay, cool. Thank you for confirming. It looks a little funny right now for me. So we get this Excel sheet downloaded from our website, and there are steps and directions right on this first page that you actually do need to follow for it to work, because if you skip a step, it will not work. And I can say that because I did that 30 minutes ago when I tried to set up these couple of examples to show you. I forgot to do step 1 because I was just thinking I can do this and I know what this is. You have to select which grant program you are using this calculator for. If you have multiple grant programs you're going to report on, I recommend saving multiple copies and renaming them based on the grant program you're reporting on. You can only select one type of grant at a time. So in my quick setup of this, I selected rural from this drop-down menu. I can back us on out. So you can see here, the drop-down menu has a big long list of a bunch of different types of grant programs. Devin mentioned already that some grant programs don't have specific categories of staff that you report on. They only have a total. So this list of possible categories to report on, it's going to change based on what you select as your grant program. So I'm going to select the culturally specific services program first. Step 2 is to indicate what full-time is at your agency. It's preset to 40 hours, but you can change it if it's not 40 hours at your agency. Step 3, this is a custom column where you can list out your staff folks' names to help you keep track of who you're reporting on. I'm just going to put staff A. Step 4 is to indicate how many months out of the 6-month reporting period did that person work under the grant. So, for example, if someone was hired in October of 2025, they only worked 3 months out of the 6-month reporting period, October, November, and December. Now you get to select in step 5 which job functions this person performed under the scope of the grant with their grant funded time. It might just be 1, but it might be 2. Step 6 is to indicate which calculation method you want to have the calculator do the math based on. And this is going to depend on the type of information you have available to you. So if you have total hours worked, you could select that and you would put the total hours. But remember, if you reported more than one function, you're going to have to put them in separately for total hours. So we can say 55 hours were spent doing counseling and 45 hours were spent doing administrative work. And in case you didn't notice, very subtly over here in step 9, the calculator created the calculated FTE values for you to copy and paste into your report. I'll do a different example than hours. We're going to say staff B worked for the whole 6-month reporting period. They were an IT staff member, and their percentage of time, even though they were full-time, they were only working on the grant 5% of the time. Again, very rapidly, Excel has created your FTE value in this right-hand column table. These are going to auto-populate for you. That's the calculator. You get to select as many different ways as you need to. So if hours worked per week was 2, then it changes again based on whatever information you put into the calculator. There's also a second tab in the calculator. It has commonly asked or frequently asked questions and answers and examples. But it also has our contact information if you so choose to reach out for help. And hopefully, if you had a question, it was answered here. If something isn't working for you, like the calculator isn't calculating, start back over at step 1 and make sure you selected your grant program, because that is literally the step I skipped. I was able to fill out the rest of this, but then the calculator wasn't working. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? I skipped the very first step. All right. I have not peeked at the chat or Q&A pod at all. How are we doing, Devin? Doing okay? All right.
Good, but slightly busy. I am seeing someone is experiencing a little issue with the T housing not giving a drop down. So I was going to ask if you could check it on yours. If you choose T housing, does it give you?
Totally. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Okay. So I changed the step 1 to T housing. I'm going to leave this at 40 hours and start again. someone worked for 4 months during the reporting period as program coordinator. I'm going to say that there were 30% grant funded. All right. So this for me, I did just download this from our website within the past hour. So if for some reason one of the cells isn't working for you, I would recommend doing what I just did here, where you select all of the things you've already entered, clear them out, and reselect from this drop-down menu. This step 1 is going to dictate the rest of the drop-down menus and what's available. So I would start there. And if you're still having troubles, we can work with you. We can always do a screen share to see if something's being funky. All right. Let's see. Do you want me to pass it to you here? Okay.
Sure. I just want to name that I see at least 2 different people are experiencing an issue using the FTE calculator today. And my guess would be it might be some kind of compatibility versioning issue within Excel. And perhaps folks need a more updated version of Excel, but I do not know for sure. And so I think I will reiterate what Casey just said. And if you're having continued issues, please reach out to us one-on-one and we can do a little screen share and take a look at what you're seeing because it is working on our computers right now, but I'm sure there's good reason for it to be difficult for you. And we're more than happy to try to troubleshoot that. Thank you. We do have one person in the Q&A, Casey, if you wouldn't mind walking them through an example of how they would do an FTE calculation based on a not standard hourly work week. There we go. I'll pass that over to you and I will walk us through the rest of our slides. And please, everyone, keep the questions coming in the Q&A pod as much as you or ask any questions that you have. Thank you. Okay, our last handful of slides are really just about where else to go for additional resources and assistance. The first one is if you have any questions or need technical support with your Just Grants account, you will need to reach out to Just Grants directly. So after you have gone to the VAWA Impact tool and filled out your entire report and generated a PDF of your answers to all the questions, you'll need to download that PDF and upload it into your Just Grants account. If when you get there, you can't find the right place to upload it, or if you're having difficulty getting into your Just Grants account, that's the type of thing you'll want to reach out to Just Grants for assistance with. So this can be a really helpful slide to save for your records because unfortunately we don't have any access into Just Grants or any real insight into that. So you'll need to work with them to get into your account, for example. Another thing I want to mention is that it can be really worthwhile to try to log in a couple days before the due date, even if you're not yet done with the report, just to make sure that you can get into your report and that you see where you need to upload your completed PDF. Secondly, if you need any help related to the scope of activities covered by your grant, so if you need to verify grant supported activities, if you need approval for products or deliverables created with grant funding, which you need before you can use them, or if for any reason you cannot submit your performance report by the deadline, which this reporting period is January 30th at 11:59 Eastern time. Very important. It's not the end of the month. It's January 30th at the end of the day on the Eastern time clock. Those are all situations where you will need to contact your OVW grant manager. They're the ones who have permission to approve products, they can tell you what is within the scope of your grant an allowable activity or what you should be focusing on with your funds if you have any questions about that. So this information can get you to that person if you don't already have a direct line of contact with your OVW program manager. And then finally, if you have any issues using the impact tool to complete your performance report, any kind of technical or logistical need for help, if you have any questions on the content of the reporting form, you will reach out to us at VAWA MEI. Casey and Andrew and myself and a whole other team of people are standing by, happy to offer one-on-one technical assistance at any point via email, phone, or Zoom, whatever is easiest for you. So if you send us an email, we can set you up with whatever type of support you are looking for. Yeah, I see a Q&A question about the time of the deadline. And you will need to make sure that you get your PDF uploaded by 11:59 Eastern time. So it doesn't matter what time zone you're in, unfortunately. It only matters what time zone Just Grants is in, and that is based out of Washington, D.C. So that is why the January 30th due date is specifically an 11:59 Eastern time deadline. Thank you so much for that question. That brings us to the end of our presentation. As we said a couple times already, this presentation was recorded and it will be available on the MEI website shortly. And in the meantime, as of right now, there's a previously recorded version with all the same information currently available on our website. And that also includes all the slides that we covered today. I'll give a final plug to reach out to us for one-on-one assistance if you have any questions. And we'll just hang out for another minute or two. I know the questions have already slowed down, so I'm thinking probably most folks don't have a question to pitch right now, but we'll give it a minute just to make sure. And thank you all so much for being here today. Additionally, especially thank you to TA2TA and all of our handful of interpreters who joined us today to make sure we could reach you. Thank you so much. I don't see another question yet, but Anna, if you wouldn't mind just letting us hang out for another minute or two to make sure there's not someone lingering with a question.
I accidentally muted and then turned off my video instead of unmuting. I was going to say, for Marissa, your question, you're going to still base the calculation on what the standard full-time work week is. So if that's 35 hours per week is considered full-time at your agency, that'll still be the base for your calculation. Even if the staff person you're talking about has a regular work week of 28 hours, they're probably considered part-time if they're not working the full 35 hours per week. I hope that helps. I know, Andrew, you were typing, and I'm sorry if I cut you off. Thank you for all your Q&A help, Andrew.
Yeah, Marissa, it depends on the number of hours worked that are paid by the grant relative to what full-time is considered at your agency. So that's really ultimately the key, full-time for your particular organization. And then as the denominator, and then the numerator will always be the number of hours paid the grant. So that is where a lot of the trickiness comes in when different funding sources come in or multiple roles. Thank you so much. I see the number is not still dropping off, but also no more questions have come in. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, you're very welcome. So I'm comfortable calling it if you are, Casey and Andrew. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you so
Thank you,
much, both
everybody.
of you. Thank you, Anna, and thank you again, everyone, for being here.